Hello, everyone. I have decided to do my informative speech on the signs and symptoms of an opioid overdose and what to do in the event that you come across one. I chose this topic because I worked for 5 years at the local detox center as a recovery specialist, and it really opened my eyes to addiction and really made me think twice about the stigmas and the stereotypes that I went into this job with. And it really made me realize that all of us are affected by addiction in one way or another, whether it be a personal, a friend of ours, family. And it's a topic that's really important to talk about. I think sometimes stigmas come with addiction, but we all fail to realize that sometimes we're addicted to things that are considered to be healthy and they aren't taboo like drugs and alcohol. So we have stigmas and judgments against people who are addicted to drugs and alcohol. But the reality is, it could be any of us if we aren't careful. I think that this topic is really important to talk about because it affects so many people, and also because it's something that can change and save a life. If somebody knows how to save someone in the event of an overdose, then it's a matter of life and death for people. So I think this is an important topic to talk about. I will say as a disclaimer for this speech that the assumption is that you have access to Narcan for the purpose of this speech. Obviously, it's understood that not everyone has access to Narcan, but it is becoming more readily available at places and more people are carrying it. So for the sake of this speech, the assumption will be that you have access to Narcan, but the understanding is that not everyone has that. So to begin the speech, I would like to give a little bit of a history of opioids and what makes them so dangerous. As we know, the opioids have been given as pain meds by doctors for years. When they were originally produced, they were marketed to doctors as being non-addictive and almost a miracle drug as far as taking away people's pain and improving patient satisfaction. For decades, pain meds have been prescribed very freely to people with the understanding that they were not doing harm to people, but in fact, really helping people. Now, of course, people in pain need help to get out of pain, but the wild and irresponsible prescribing of these pain meds for years is what led to the heroin and opioid epidemic that we know today. Unfortunately, when doctors started to realize that these opioids were in fact addictive, they stopped prescribing them to people. Understandably so, but unfortunately, it left people sick and withdrawing at home and not sure what to do. Many people, not knowing what to do, turned to street drugs. They started buying their pain pills on the street, which becomes very expensive and can be very hard to find. So the next step was people turned to heroin. For years, heroin was pure heroin. People would use in the morning, go to work all day, come home, and use again. A lot of people didn't even realize that their coworkers and friends and family were addicted because people were able to function a lot of the time while using heroin. But as the years went on and fentanyl was added to the drug, it became less and less manageable for people and more dangerous. The reason fentanyl has been added into the drugs over the years is because it makes drugs more potent and therefore makes them more appealing to customers, but also because the half-life of fentanyl is much less than the half-life of heroin. So as I just said, people could use heroin in the morning, go to work for the day, and then come home and use again, and they would maintain without being sick. While fentanyl is starting to get out of your system within an hour or 2 hours after using, and immediately people are going into withdrawals and feeling sick shortly after using. Therefore, customers have to go back quicker to their drug dealers. Therefore, this is why fentanyl is added to the drugs. Fentanyl is 50 times more potent than heroin. So a lot of times people don't realize that when they're using what they think is the same amount, they're actually using outlandish amounts of fentanyl, which is proving to be deadly to people. So A little bit of why fentanyl is in the drugs and why it's so dangerous leads us to what to look for in someone if you believe they could be having an overdose. Now, I'm going to start by saying people are not expected to be medical professionals. If you walk up to somebody on the street who you believe to be overdosing, it can be scary. It can be intimidating if you don't know what you're looking for. So that's why we're going to talk about the signs and symptoms to look for. But a really important fact to state is that if you find someone who you think is having an opioid overdose and you use Narcan on them and it turns out that it wasn't an opioid overdose, you will not hurt the person by giving them Narcan. It's a really important thing to know because a lot of people hesitate to give that Narcan because they second guess themselves and they aren't sure if it's an opioid overdose. But the fact is, you will not harm someone by giving them a dose of Narcan if it is not an overdose. So you're better off to be safe than sorry and give the dose if you believe it could be an opioid overdose. Okay, so if you come across someone who seems to be unconscious or fading in and out of consciousness, that could possibly be an overdose. A lot of times you'll see their breathing will be very slowed, sometimes down to absolutely nothing, but sometimes just a few breaths per minute. A lot of times you'll hear choking or gurgling sounds when someone's overdosing and they're struggling to breathe. Somebody's body will go limp. You'll pick up an arm and you'll immediately drop down with no resistance, meaning they have absolutely no control over their body. A lot of times people's lips or fingertips will turn blue, which is a sign that they're not getting proper oxygen. And that can be another sign of an overdose. And people's pupils, when they use opioids, get very small. You hear an expression called pinned pupils, that the pupils are so small you can barely see them. And that is another very classic sign of an opioid overdose. And one major thing that can usually arouse people who are not overdosing or who are not unconscious is called a sternal rub. Medical professionals will take their knuckles, put it on someone's sternum, and give a very hard, and it seems almost abusive when you first see one, but the idea is that someone who is semi-conscious or aware will have a reaction to that. It's natural response to have a reaction when somebody is giving you a sternal rub. But if someone is completely unconscious, like someone who is having an overdose, they will have no response to a sternal rub. And that's scary because that means that they definitely are unconscious and they're not aware, because a sternal rub is uncomfortable. So if you notice these signs, pinned pupils, slow to no breathing, a limp body, loss of consciousness, choking, gurgling sounds, blue lips, you most likely are witnessing an overdose. So in the event that happens, you want to call 911 right away. Get the professionals on the way to come help you. That's the major thing. Second thing you want to do, again, this is on the assumption that you have Narcan available, is you want to get your Narcan out. This is the package that Narcan comes in and how it looks. I'm using an expired Narcan, so it's okay that I'm opening it to demonstrate how we would use this. So we would open the package. There is an information packet in here if you need it. That'll tell you how to administer it if you forget. Don't hesitate. Take a minute and read it if you need to. It's okay. Now the Narcan looks like this. It's designed for people who don't necessarily know what they're doing to be able to figure it out. You're going to put 2 fingers on the top of this plunger on either side. This is where the piece will go into their nose, and this is the plunger underneath. What you would do is you would try to lay someone on their back. You want to push their chin up so their head is tilted back as much as possible. Having a hand under their neck to support the head is always good if possible. try to tilt their chin up and head back, and you put the Narcan in their nose up until your fingers touch the edge of their nose, and you're going to push the plunger with your thumb, and that will spray the medicine up into their nasal passage. You don't have to do anything after that as far as administering the med. This will do it all for you. Now, if you are able to, once you administer the Narcan, it's good for you to turn the person on their side. We call it the rescue position, which helps people in the event that they throw up. They'll keep them from choking, and it's a safe position to try to keep people in if at all possible. Now, the thing with Narcan is sometimes a second dose is required. Sometimes a first dose is not enough to reverse the effects of an overdose, and you may need a second dose, which you have to wait 3 minutes in between doses to give to someone. I promise that 3 minutes feels like an eternity, but if you give the dose too soon, it's ineffective, so it essentially is a waste of a dose. So when you give someone a dose of Narcan, try to check your watch to see the time and wait 3 minutes and give a second dose if necessary. Hopefully by now, medical professionals will be arriving so they can take over. But in the meantime, you potentially could be saving a life with these simple steps that you can do. I know how overwhelming a situation like this can be. I've been witness to many overdoses, and the first time it happened to me, I was terrified. Even though I knew all the things to do, it was still very scary. But knowing these steps really can change the outcome for people and can save lives. So it's really important to talk about, and hopefully if the event ever arose, you might remember this video and say, I know what to do. I can help this person. So remember what you're looking for in the signs and symptoms of an overdose, and then what to do in the event of one. And you may actually save a life. Well, I hope this video was informative, and I look forward to hearing feedback from people. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.